A new surface clip, like, 20 years of 9/11 research, and I've never seen this clip, but this is amazing. An Israeli interviewed on 9/11. You can just tell, this is 9/11, everybody's in the streets. The Israeli, look at her facial expressions talking about this terrorist attack. She can't even hold back the smiles. We're going to play what she says in a second, but just look at the facial expression. She can't even control her micro expressions. The Israeli in New York on 9/11. She says the same thing that the dancing Israelis say, like, now you understand why they supposedly were high-fiving and dancing and celebrating, was because, now the Americans will know what we put up with the terrorist Muslims.
With the kind of people that we're dealing with. Well, big catastrophe, and I'm Israeli, and I hope that now people understand what we have to deal with, the kind of people that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It's just a catastrophe.
Look at this one.
It's a big catastrophe.
She's literally like can't hold back her smile as she says it's a big catastrophe. She's happy. She's
Russell Dobular here in for Jimmy while he is in Europe. Theo Von hosted winner of the post-pubescent Charlie Brown lookalike contest, J.D. Vance, for a conversation, a wide-ranging conversation, and they got to talking about Gaza because Theo Von, just about a couple of weeks back, obviously went viral for a pretty impassioned monologue about how he came to the realization that Israel's campaign in Gaza does in fact constitute a genocide. Now, he does not have the legal definition handy, but he was able to instinctively find the truth, which is plainly obvious, but not so much to J.D. Vance. So let's take a look at this exchange.
Good dude.
Yeah.
You should have him.
I think
Let's talk about Steve Woodcock.
Mr. Witkoff, but I never met him. But
Good dude.
Yeah.
You should have him.
He'd be awesome.
I think the tough thing just as a regular person, right? It's like we're seeing all these videos of people like picking up pieces of their children and like it's the sickest thing I think it's ever been televised. Basically, if you consider watching something on your phone being televised,
sad, man.
It feels like a massacre, and it feels like I've called it a genocide. Other people have different thoughts about it, and that's fine, right? And I don't need anybody to share the same thoughts or you two. But I think where it gets scary is that we give. We're complicit in it because we help fund like military stuff, and that's where as like a regular guy, you're like, well, I'm paying these taxes and they're going towards this, like, but you can't do anything, like you can talk, but it's like, you can't, I don't understand how it becomes like tough for people. Like sometimes it feels like we look out for the interests of Israel before we look out for the interests of America.
Interesting. Wow. Good question. Good question. Just an ordinary guy. He's not an anti-Semite. He's just an ordinary guy thinking that. And it's gotten to the point where, ordinary people are thinking, hey, wait a minute. Why is it that so many in our government seem more loyal to Israel than they are to the United States? And not just the Jewish ones. But quite a few of them. Let's hear J.D. Vance's answer.
So let me say a couple things. So number one, like, I think you're a great dude, so we don't always have to agree on everything. Do I think do I think it's a genocide? No. And here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide, because I don't think that the Israelis are purposely trying to go in and murder every Palestinian. I don't think that's what they're doing.
Oh, really?
I think they got hit hard, and I think they're trying to like sort of destroy this terrorist organization. And war is hell.
Okay, let's stop right there. Let's just play that back for just a second.
And here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide, because I don't think that the Israelis are purposely trying to go in and murder every Palestinian. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they got hit hard, and I think they're trying to like sort of destroy this terrorist organization.
Okay, so and war is hell, of course. So it's not a genocide because they're not going in there trying to murder every Palestinian. And they got hit hard. Well, first of all, I think you could make a good argument that they are doing their very best to kill as many Palestinians as is necessary to drive out the remaining survivors. So whether you want to technically call that a war of extermination or not, in effect, it certainly is. But that notwithstanding, we'll refer to a little thing called international law, which I know this is kind of nerdy and dweeby. No one in our elected office seems to give a damn about international law. They all wipe their ass with international law, or in J.D. Vance's case, he sticks this between two couch cushions. But we can cite it. We can cite it because this is what you actually cite when it comes to determining whether or not the crime of genocide has taken place. So the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, enacted shortly after the Second World War in response to, ironically and oddly enough, a genocide of the Jews, which, by the way, notice,
crazy, right?
They did do a genocide against the Jews, and yet they didn't kill all of us. Russ and I are still here. So that means you don't have to kill every single member of a group for it to constitute a genocide. In fact, genocide is defined very specifically. So Article 1, this is important. The contracting parties confirm that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law, which they undertake to prevent and to punish. So J.D. Vance saying they got hit hard and war is hell, that's neither here nor there. Genocide applies whether you are in a time of peace or at a time of war. In other words, you cannot commit a genocide and say, well, it's a war and war is hell. No, you are not allowed to commit genocide in times of peace or in times of war. So the fact that you got hit hard and war is hell, those are not excuses according to international law. Secondly, perhaps more importantly, Article 2 gets a bit more specific. So in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in parts, i.e. you don't have to kill everyone, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. So there are 5 different criteria here. Killing members of the group. Well, check. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Check again.
Yep.
Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Check. Obviously. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, i.e. bombing all of the hospitals and blockading aid, which means no food gets in. Check. 5. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. That is the only piece of criteria that has not been fully satisfied yet, but they are working on it because if you notice, they're trying to get other countries to take children in, right? So they have already met 4 conditions of genocide. They are working on the 5th, which means you could really say they're guilty of all 5 because the 5th one, the only reason that hasn't happened yet is because they haven't found countries that are willing to take them in because other countries don't want to be complicit in the aforementioned genocide. Okay, so according to the letter of the law, they have fully satisfied 4.5, if we want to be generous, conditions that constitute genocide. It's important to be armed with this information because you hear that defense quite a bit, not just from J.D. Vance, but from pundits. Well, if they wanted to commit a genocide, why are there still so many of them? Right. Why are there so many of them?
We must be bad at genocide.
Right. Exactly. That is neither here nor there. So that is nonsense. So let's go back to J.D. Vance.
And war is hell, and that is true. I also think it's true, man. I mean, I've seen people on my side of the political aisle. I'm a Republican. You know that, but your audience may not. Who will see these videos of these innocent Palestinian kids and say, "Oh, well, they had it coming to them." No. Like if you have a soul, your heart should break when you see a little kid who's
in
suffering,
the business,
which is why we have the policy.
Man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
They're very convenient in my line of work. Straw men.
Yes.
You see this person who's so much worse even than the argument I'm making. Don't I look good by comparison to this imaginary person I'm pointing out?
Yes. Aren't I just a picture of ethics and empathy compared to this person?
I'm not like the person who says children deserve to be blown apart. I'm not that guy.
Right. And those guys really need to knock it off.
Yeah.
We're trying to eliminate the conflict, eliminate the source of the conflict so that we can actually bring some peace and some humanitarian assistance into people. And
well, it's interesting because they're in the next segment we're going to do, there was this boat that was on its way to Gaza to bring some humanitarian assistance, and they were apprehended, and they're now being detained out of contact with the rest of the world. If you were so determined to get that humanitarian assistance in, you may have told Israel, hey, you know what? Let them through. Let them drop some food off on the beach and be on their way. But you didn't do that. No, instead you contracted out the humanitarian aid mission, quote unquote, to your mercenary friends who now shoot Palestinians a couple dozen at a time when they come to get the aid.
This is something most people don't.
Nice to mention.
It's something most people don't know, Theo. The size of the strap-on that Miriam chooses to use on us is directly proportionate to how much aid we give to Israel and how much they abet the genocide. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a 12-incher or one of those, but I promise you, you would send that military aid if you did.
And that's my basic view. And the president's interesting. He's a pro-Israel guy.
Yeah.
And he also recognizes that to bring any conflict to a close, you've got to talk to everybody. Yeah. And so, we've been attacked. I've been attacked. The president's been attacked for being too interested in diplomacy. And you ask, like, what can I do?
Again, by who? Again, by who? This is a version of a straw man, right? Putting out the most extreme version of a just genocidal maniac that you can and saying, hey, we look good by comparison. But now he tries to pivot. And boy, does he pick a bad topic to pivot to given the events of these past couple days.
I think that what people should demand is that if our tax dollars are going to something, we should be actively trying to fix it. Okay, that's kind of the way that I think about it.
Like letting the
and what happened with the Biden administration, man, it's crazy. They were spending so much money all over the world. They weren't engaged in diplomacy at all. So they'd sent, we sent $300 billion to Ukraine, for example. And you never had the president of the United States actually trying to force a diplomatic settlement. You talk about bodies all over the ground. Dude, the Russia-Ukraine thing is the most vicious. We see satellite images, we see classified images, man. Yeah, it is vicious. And again, it's I will hear people who will say, well, they're again mostly on our side will say, oh, these the Russians got killed. That's a good thing. Look, I'm not defending the invasion. I'm not defending starting a war. But when human beings are getting blown to bits, your heart should feel sad about that, and you should try to do something to fix it. And
you should, just like Donald Trump promised to have it fixed within 24 hours. And that's really interesting that you would bring up the Russia-Ukraine war on a week like this, when now peace looks more out of reach than it ever has in the past 3 years. We are actually in far worse shape. We're going to do a segment on that later this evening. But Russia just sent record-breaking blows and strikes into Ukraine, putting the peace process further away than I think it's ever been since the start of this conflict. So what your boss there, JD, was able to do what he does best, which is browbeat, one of his adversaries on camera. He brought Zelensky into the Oval Office and he gave him a dressing down, and we all enjoyed that. It was a cathartic thing to watch. But peace is actually further off in Ukraine than it was when he got in, I would say. And so you picked a hell of a thing to pivot to, given the events of this week. I know this was recorded a few days ago, but wow, that aged like milk, as does just about everything he says there. From the just completely ignorant and ahistorical definition of genocide to his deflection to Ukraine. Not a good week for peace and diplomacy, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was just it was really a clinic in political bullshit speak for anybody who wants to get into that line of work. It was really a master class in straw manning and then deflecting. Just straw mans to the person who has an impossibly insane view that he's not like. And then he pivots to Ukraine. Well, hey, let's talk about Ukraine because we see the satellite images. It's also interesting if you look at the kind of language he uses, if you look at the way he's talking to Theo Von, you cannot overstate how much this has to do with why Donald Trump is the president and why the Democrats, in spite of the deep unpopularity of everything they're doing with most of the voting public, have still not gained any traction. Because even though, yes, he's lying, he's deflecting, he's obfuscating, he's a very smart, well-educated guy, unlike some of the people, including Donald Trump, who are very ignorant on these subjects. you can be fairly assured J.D. Vance knows exactly what a load of horseshit he's peddling here is. He comes off like a dude bro, right? And the Democrats come off like sexless androids who want to tell you how to raise your kids. It's their whole vibe. Their whole vibe is so uncomfortable with regular people. They're so removed from regular people. They're so uncomfortable in their own skin in these kinds of settings. I can't even think of a Democrat who could handle that interview that way. Like, he comes off as very relatable as he is doing the job of deflecting attention from genocide and really doing a kind of dude bro version of the old Israeli go-to. It's complicated.
Yeah. Well, you notice Kash Patel went on Rogan this week. You got JD Vance going on Theo Von.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like the podcast circuit is like their version of the old Fox News primetime circuit. Hey, we can always go on O'Reilly. We can always go on O'Reilly and talk to the base. Well, it's like that here, you know.
Yep. That's exactly what it is.
You know, and it's well timed in that sense, because obviously this was a tumultuous week in MAGA world, given the epic breakup, which threatened to fracture the coalition. So yeah, no, they do have this sort of podcast network that they can go to in a pinch and sort of have a direct line of communication to the base, which is much more intimate than like going on the O'Reilly Factor for 8 minutes, you know, surrounded by a commercial on both ends. Like, Kash Patel was on Rogan for 2 hours, you know, and so these long form formats give them a sort of line of communication to the base that the Democrats don't have. I mean, the Democrats are talking about, we need a Joe Rogan for the left. So they're still looking for their person. So they don't have it,
which, you know,
which makes them more reliant on legacy media, which makes them even more detached from the ordinary person as legacy media becomes more and more irrelevant.
Well, and their idea of a Joe Rogan of their own would be someone who would fit their cringe standards and thereby never be able to function in that way. And as many have pointed out, including Bill Maher in one of, I think, his better monologues last week, they had a Joe Rogan of their own. His name was Joe Rogan.
Right, exactly.
He was one of them. And Bernie, under pressure from AOC, decided not to embrace his endorsement. So at that point, you're Joe Rogan. Okay, so the establishment goons, the Nancy Pelosi's, are going to hate you, but the progressive left is going to be down with you, right? And then you see not even that. Even they're going to vilify you and rule you out of bounds. You know, of course, you're going to wind up going to the other mafia family. You know, we've talked about this. I think when you get to a certain level, they're not going to let you exist without picking a team. You got to pick a team. You got to be on somebody's side in this war of the oligarchs. Otherwise, they'll crush you, man. You want protection when the libs are coming and trying to get Spotify to pull you off the air. You got to bend the knee to the trumpets. You got to bend the knee to Mark Andreessen, Humpty Dumpty, and you know, the rest of the Silicon Valley goons, or they'll leave you out to hang. And eventually the libs will probably get their way and destroy your career.
All right.